Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through the noise, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, and make you instantly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into a fascinating story. It really starts with just a single social media post, but quickly unraveled into something much bigger, a revelation, really, about the hidden mechanics of online influence. So picture this. It's June 26, 2025. The U.S. ambassador to Japan, Ambassador Greer, puts out a post on X, used to be Twitter, and the message was pretty direct. It said, "Fentanyl and methamphetamine threaten lives in both Japan and the U.S. The Chinese Communist Party is intentionally fueling this crisis. We must cooperate with Japan to stop it." Now, at first glance, you might think, okay, a strong message, sure, but pretty standard diplomacy, maybe.
A bit pointed, perhaps.
Exactly. But what happened next was anything but standard. This post didn't just get, a little bit of traction, it absolutely exploded.
Yep.
Within hours, it was being retweeted at this incredible rate across Japanese online timelines. It just dominated the conversation. And it looked totally organic, like a viral moment, maybe genuine public concern catching fire.
This kind of thing you see happen sometimes.
Yeah. But as we're about to uncover in this deep dive, there was something much more orchestrated going on just beneath the surface. So our mission today is to unpack this really meticulous report that analyzed the rapid spread of that exact post. And it reveals some truly surprising findings about how information or, well, maybe disinformation can spread online.
Especially when it involves international relations.
Right, even between allies. So we're here to extract the most important insights about these modern influence operations, these IOs, and how they subtly shape, how we understand the world.
And that's precisely what makes this so crucial, I think. It's not just about what was in the post, but the massive implications of how it got out there. Understanding these underlying mechanics of how information spreads online, it's absolutely essential if you want to grasp how public discourse gets shaped.
Yeah.
Sometimes in ways we don't even see happening. It kind of forces us to question what looks like organic public opinion.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The core finding of this report is, well, it's nothing short of startling. It completely challenges that initial impression of just an ambassador's tweet going viral on its own.
Right.
The report actually analyzed 500 users who retweeted that message, and their conclusion points to pretty compelling evidence of what they flat out describe as a Trump administration-led influence operation, an IO.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more significant is the strategic aim they think was behind it, driving a wedge between Japan and China.
And a huge claim.
It is a huge claim, isn't it? So what makes these researchers so confident? I mean, how did they arrive at that?
It is. And you're right to ask. The methodology they used was quite rigorous, which is why we need to look closely. They didn't just guess. They started by identifying what they called pseudobots within that whole network of retweets.
Pseudobots, okay.
Yeah. They flagged accounts if they met at least 2 out of 5 specific criteria, things you could actually observe.
Like what?
Like a random jumble of letters and numbers for the user ID, using the default profile picture, having a suspicious or really generic bio,
Okay.
being a brand new account, or having a really unbalanced follow ratio, following thousands but only having a few followers back, that kind of thing.
Got it. 2 out of 5.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the results were honestly striking. A full 50.2% of the accounts they analyzed met these criteria.
Wow, 50%. Over half.
Over half, 50.2%. Now, to give you some perspective, right? Typical bot contamination rates you find in, say, other political data sets, they're usually more in the range of 20, maybe 30%.
So this is way higher. Significantly higher. Over 50%. That strongly suggests something way beyond just normal organic activity. It points towards, as the report puts it, a mass bot mobilization in a short period, like a deliberate, large-scale push to get that message out there almost instantly.
That's a staggering figure. But, how do they really know? It wasn't just some unusually active group of real people. Did they cross-verify?
That's a fair question. And this is where it gets really interesting, actually, and adds weight to their findings. They didn't just stop with those heuristic methods, those rule-based checks we just talked about.
Okay.
They went further. They used advanced, unsupervised machine learning methods, things like k-means and DB-scan clustering.
Ah, the machine learning angle.
Exactly. These techniques find patterns in data without being told what to look for beforehand. And even using these really sophisticated methods, the results were remarkably consistent. They still found that a bot majority cluster accounted for 46 to 47% of the accounts.
Wow, so very close to the first number. Yeah, only about a 4% difference between 2 totally different ways of analyzing it. That really strengthens their conclusion that, yeah, around half the accounts involved were bots.
Okay, that's compelling. And the report explained how these bots worked, because just having bots isn't the whole story.
Right. And this part is crucial. They were specifically designed to avoid overtly political language in their profiles.
So you wouldn't see, like, MAGA or Patriot or whatever in their bio.
Exactly. No overt flags like that. Their focus was purely quantitative, just spreading the message, volume. The idea was to create the impression of what the report calls natural ignition. Like the message was just catching fire spontaneously among real people, these human-run hub accounts within certain online groups.
Clever. So it looks grassroots, even if it's being artificially boosted.
Precisely. A tactic to sort of bypass detection and create that illusion of genuine support.
And did they identify which specific online communities were being targeted?
They did. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes very clear. The report details that the main battleground for this whole operation was the Japanese conservative community online.
Okay, that makes sense strategically.
And the data really backs this up. Get this. They found 36 accounts that had explicit right-wing keywords in their bios, things like conservative, patriot, Sansado, even MAGA.
Right.
Of those 36 accounts, a significant 64% were classified as bots.
64% of the ones with political bios.
Exactly. Now, compare that to the other side. They only found 3 accounts using left-wing terms in their bios, and out of those 3, only 1 was identified as a bot.
Wow, that's a stark difference.
It's a huge imbalance, isn't it? It shows a very clear, very intentional skew in the targeting. It wasn't about swaying everyone. It was about cultivating a specific sentiment within a group likely to be receptive.
So, okay, we've got the mechanics, the bots, the targeting. Let's zoom out again. What were the bigger, geopolitical goals here, according to the report?
Yeah, the report dives into that. It outlines what it assesses as 3 strategic returns. For the U.S. specifically, they say, the Trump administration from running an operation like this.
Okay, what are they?
First, deterrence of pro-China alignment risk. The idea here was to create this really emotional frame around the drug threat. The goal wasn't just information. It was to subtly narrow Japan's flexibility, its willingness to cooperate with China, kind of push Japan towards a harder anti-China line.
Okay, make China look like a danger, limit Japan's options. Makes sense. What's number 2?
Second was externalization of domestic politics. This is about shifting blame, basically, taking the U.S.'s own complex internal fentanyl crisis and pointing the finger squarely at China.
Right, deflect criticism at home about drug policy failures.
Exactly. And at the same time, build a stronger case for being tough on China internationally.
Okay, and the third one?
Third was expansion of alliance role. So by constructing this narrative, this threat involving precursor chemical transfer via Japan, it served to pull Japan deeper into a broader anti-China enforcement network, essentially positioning Japan as more of a frontline base in that effort.
And there's a detail in the report that feels, well, almost cynical. It says, Ambassador Greer's message sensationalized a crisis despite near zero fentanyl seizure cases in Japan.
That's a critical point.
So it wasn't really about a drug epidemic happening in Japan itself.
Apparently not, based on the seizure data at the time. The report suggests it functioned more as a rhetorical tool.
A tool to, what, justify the Trump administration's hardline stance on China?
That's what the report argues, yeah. And also to subtly steer Japanese public opinion towards being more cautious, maybe even antagonistic towards China, basically lining Japan up with a specific U.S. foreign policy goal.
Wow, it really shows how a narrative can be built to serve a purpose, doesn't it? Not just report facts.
Absolutely. It's a powerful example. And digging deeper into the actual structure of this retweet network, the report identified this very clear, very efficient pattern. They called it star-shaped.
Star-shaped. How did that work?
Okay, so imagine it. At the center of this star, you had these mid-tier human hubs. Real people, often with some online presence already. They posted the initial messages, often using those conservative keywords we talked about.
Yeah.
They were the sort of visible, credible faces.
The starting points.
Right. Then, surrounding them on the outer edge of the star were the colorless bots.
Colorless bots. Why colorless?
Because, as the report highlights, they didn't have any obvious political language or identifying stuff in their profiles. Remember, their job wasn't to argue or persuade with words.
Right, just amplify sheer volume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the fascinating part, the coordination. These outer bots would synchronize their retweets, often within a crazy short window, like 30 to 60 seconds after the human hub posted.
30 seconds. That's highly coordinated.
Extremely. This rapid, synchronized burst was designed specifically to trick the social media algorithms, make them think, wow, this content is super popular, high engagement, trending.
Ah, gaming the algorithm.
Precisely. And that artificial boost then push the content out further to general users who then see it and think, oh, this must be a really big deal. Everyone's talking about it.
Right.
The report uses this really vivid analogy, actually. It says the human hubs were the face of the message, providing the spark, the seeming legitimacy,
Okay.
while the bots provided the lung capacity. That huge artificial breadth of amplification needed to shove the message into the mainstream conversation.
Wow. Lung capacity. That's a good way to put it, like a choreographed flash mob or something.
Yeah, that's a great comparison. A few lead dancers start, then bam, an army joins in, making it look like this huge spontaneous thing.
Which brings us to this other critical idea the report highlights. Friendly IO, influence operations coming from countries we consider allies, like the U.S. in this case. The report points out pretty directly that these U.S. origin operations haven't gotten nearly the same scrutiny as ones from, say, Russia or China.
That's right. It's a significant blind spot, isn't it?
It really is. We're kind of conditioned to look for this stuff from adversaries, but what happens when it comes from, inside the house, so to speak?
And this raises a hugely important question. The implications of this friendly I.O. are profound. The report issues a pretty stark warning, and I think it really resonates. It says, if nations neglect monitoring or investigating influence operations, just because they come from an ally, then the health of the public discourse space cannot be protected. It fundamentally challenges our assumptions about where threats to reliable information come from.
So look beyond the flag on the operation, look at the tactics themselves.
Exactly, regardless of the source. And their conclusion is pretty definitive. Those consistent bot percentages, 50% heuristic, 46% machine learning, plus that clear division of labor.
The hubs and the colorless bots.
Right. The human hubs using political language, the bots just spreading it quantitatively. They say this represents a classic scheme. A scheme designed not just to amplify, but to create the illusion of spontaneous enthusiasm, genuine support within those Japanese conservative circles.
While actually steering public opinion towards being anti-China.
Precisely. So ultimately, this specific operation, using fentanyl as the hook, effectively justified the Trump administration's hardline China policy, both at home and abroad. And it generated strategic benefits by pulling Japan actively into that whole narrative. It's kind of a masterclass in pursuing geopolitics through digital means, even with your partners.
So given how powerful this can be, the report doesn't just diagnose the problem, right? It suggests a solution.
It does. It advocates for setting up a robust third-party verification system.
And what would that do?
It would be specifically designed to detect and disclose these automated networks. And crucially, it would do it regardless of the originating country or friendly status.
So no free passes just because you're an ally.
Exactly. The goal is clear. Prevent similar friendly I.O. events from happening again. Try and foster a more transparent, more trustworthy information space for everybody. It's basically a call for universal standards for digital honesty.
So as we wrap up this deep dive then, the core takeaway really seems to be just how sophisticated and often hidden these modern influence operations are. What looks like totally organic online chatter, a real groundswell of opinion, can actually be a carefully planned, meticulously orchestrated campaign, even coming from sources you wouldn't expect, even from allies. It really challenges us, doesn't it? To look deeper, question the surface of the information we see online, especially when it's about complex international stuff.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how this whole thing reminds us that influence can come from really surprising directions. It kind of blurs the lines between just information and a deliberate operation. This isn't just about spotting, obvious deep fakes or totally fake news anymore. It's about understanding the subtle manipulation of what looks like public feeling, even when it comes from actors we might consider friends. So maybe something for you to think about. How might this understanding change the way you evaluate news from now on, especially news about international relations? What new questions might you start asking yourself about the digital conversations you encounter every day?